The day before Boris Johnson said he'd step down as Prime Minister, he appeared before a parliamentary select committee and said this.
I'm certainly not going to deny having met Alexander Lebedev. I certainly have.
Alexander Lebedev is a Russian billionaire, a former owner of London's Evening Standard newspaper and a former KGB officer. Boris Johnson was asked about him.
When you were Foreign Secretary, did you meet with officials or without officials?
I certainly met him without officials.
The committee specifically wanted to know if there was a meeting without officials in Italy in April 2018.
On the occasion you're mentioning, if that was when I was Foreign Secretary, then yes.
And that has drawn attention.
The implications are huge, I think. It's really irregular, really unusual for a Foreign Secretary to attend a meeting like that without the proper protocols in place, and there are really serious national security implications.
Certainly the meeting raises questions. The ministerial code states a private secretary or official should be present for all discussions relating to government business. We now know no officials were present, but we don't know what was discussed. The code also says if a meeting happens socially, any significant content should be passed back to the department as soon as possible after the event. Mr. Johnson was asked about this.
Did you report to your officials that you had met him?
I think I did mention it, yes.
Mr. Johnson thinks he mentioned it. He's also said he'll write to the committee with more detail. And the opposition has questions. Here are two of them.
Did the Foreign Office, the Home Office and the Security Service know about this meeting in advance? Was a detailed record made after the event?
And one of the reasons this meeting is generating so much interest is the timing of it. In March 2018, there was a nerve agent attack in Salisbury. A former Russian agent and his daughter were poisoned. They survived, but a local British woman died. And Boris Johnson led the condemnation.
We will continue to make the case to our friends and allies that as a committee of nations, we need to stand up to Russia.
Weeks later, Mr. Johnson would meet Alexander Lebedev. And if there are questions about that, there are also questions about Boris Johnson's friendship with Alexander Lebedev's son, Yevgeny, who's the owner of the London Evening Standard. He moved to the UK aged 8. He became a British citizen with joint Russian nationality in 2010. And he and Boris Johnson go back a number of years. While Mayor of London, Mr. Johnson said, "I'm proud to call him a friend." That was 2011. 5 years later, Boris Johnson was deciding whether to support Brexit in the referendum. And as he weighed that choice, he invited Cabinet Minister Michael Gove and his wife Sarah Vine for dinner. Afterwards, Sarah Vine wrote, also there was the Russian media mogul Yevgeny Lebedev. The next year, the journalist Robert Peston would note that Yevgeny Lebedev and Johnson seemed close. For 5 years, every October from 2011 to 2016, Johnson spent a weekend at Lebedev's lavish Palazzo Terranova in Umbria. We know from official records that Boris Johnson accepted at least 4 trips to the Lebedev residence in Italy while Mayor of London. And we know Boris Johnson decided to back Brexit. By the end of 2019, he was Prime Minister. He'd won an election. And with that role came the power to nominate people to the unelected second chamber of Parliament, the House of Lords. And in December 2020, Yevgeny Lebedev was sworn in as a crossbench peer.
I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, her heirs and successors according to law.
He became Lord Lebedev of Hampton and Siberia. He'd been nominated by Boris Johnson. And when Russia invaded Ukraine earlier this year, that nomination process came under renewed scrutiny. The Sunday Times reports that in March 2020, the House of Lords Appointments Commission, which vets peerages, wrote to the Prime Minister advising him against granting Lebedev a lifetime seat in the Lords. The paper says this was because the appointment posed a national security risk. Boris Johnson's former chief advisor, Dominic Cummings, has also written about this, saying, "I was in the room when the PM was told by officials that the intelligence services and other parts of the deep state had, let's say, serious reservations about the PM's plan." Another source has confirmed to the BBC that concerns were raised by security services. And the Sunday Times tells us what happened next. It reports that Johnson met Lebedev at his home 2 days after the initial rejection. And we can see on official records that on that day, the Prime Minister met with Lebedev Holdings. Mr. Johnson was asked about that.
Did you meet with him in March 2020 at the height of the pandemic to discuss giving him a peerage?
Listen, it is very, very important.
Did you meet with
it is
him,
very,
Prime
very,
Minister?
it is very, very important that this should not turn into a general sense that we're against Russians.
The question went unanswered. And if the focus there is March 2020, the Sunday Times picks up the story again. By June, it tells us, the Commission received an update about Lebedev. Officials advised that the security services no longer deemed his peerage to be problematic. We don't know why the advice changed. And Mr. Johnson was asked about this.
Did you intervene to secure Evgeny Lebedev a peerage when you discovered the security services thought he posed a national security threat?
That is simply incorrect.
Boris Johnson says it's incorrect that he intervened. We do, though, have multiple sources saying that security concerns had been raised with him. To understand those concerns, we need to turn back to Yevgeny Lebedev's father, Alexander, and his time working for the KGB, which for many years was the Soviet security agency. Vladimir Putin worked there, so did many of his aides. But Yevgeny Lebedev says this isn't relevant. In March, he wrote, "My father, a long time ago, was a foreign intelligence agent of the KGB, but I am not some agent of Russia." Evidently, though, for a time, the security services saw a security risk, and that connects to his father. For his part, Alexander Lebedev says his KGB work is in the past. This is from 2018.
I'm a former, but that's been 26 years, officer of Soviet foreign intelligence, which is public knowledge.
But questions about ongoing links to the Kremlin remain. Here is Alexander Lebedev with a senior Russian government official in early February this year. The photos were posted on the official's Instagram account. Also this year, Alexander Lebedev was among a group of Russians sanctioned by Canada. In a statement, we were told these individuals have directly enabled Vladimir Putin's senseless war in Ukraine and bear responsibility for the pain and suffering of the people of Ukraine. It is these concerns that, in part, explain this renewed scrutiny on that Boris Johnson meeting without officials in April 2018. And we know that just before it, April the 27th, Boris Johnson, as Foreign Secretary, attended a NATO summit which delivered this message on the Salisbury poisonings.
The attack takes place against the background of a pattern of reckless behavior by Russia.
The next day, April the 28th, Boris Johnson travelled from NATO in Brussels to Yevgeny Lebedev's villa in Italy. We know he met Alexander Lebedev there. The next morning, April the 29th, Mr. Johnson was pictured at Perugia airport. The Guardian published photos reporting that they suggest he did go to Italy without a police escort, an escort that would be normal for a foreign secretary. The Guardian also spoke to passengers on Mr. Johnson's flight. They described him looking like he had slept in his clothes, as well as struggling to walk in a straight line and telling other passengers he had had a heavy night. And here's the journalist Paul Caruana Galizia again on why he believes this meeting matters.
He went there expressly to discuss the Skripal case with Alexander Lebedev. We have it from three people who were each in their own way connected to the Foreign Office.
Mr. Johnson has not commented directly on this claim, but here's more from Paul Caruana Galizia.
We know that he, in the past, before this meeting, floated the idea with his officials at the Foreign Office of using Alexander Lebedev as an intermediary between himself as Foreign Secretary and the Russian government.
For these reasons and more, the opposition has these questions too.
There are also rumours that Alexander Lebedev was trying to arrange a phone call from the meeting with the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov. Is that true? Did that phone call happen?
There are other questions as well. And this is a statement that Number 10 has given the BBC. It reads, the Prime Minister has been at the forefront of the international response to Putin's barbaric invasion of Ukraine. As Foreign Secretary, in response to the Skripal poisoning, he also played a significant role in condemning the actions of Russia. A declaration for hospitality for the social occasion referenced was correctly made. The Prime Minister is also committed to writing to the Liaison Committee.